More than enough to let the light in. The way you're making me feel, it's divine. It's enough to let it flow, let it be. 'Cause you're everything that I crave in this life. 'Cause we're everything we can find in another life. Take my hand and my promises, they're yours to be held, and I want you. I only want you. Keep my heart and my honor is yours to be held, and I want you. I only want you for the rest of my life. My life. For the rest of my life. You're in my sight and my mind. In the quiet and up front out loud. In the calm, in my spirit and the storm. 'Cause you're everything that I crave in this life. 'Cause we're everything we can't find in another life. Take my hand and my promises, they're yours to be held, and I want you. I only want you. Keep my heart and my honor is yours to be held, and I want you. I only want you for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life. For the rest of my life. For the rest of my life.
Welcome to the locker room. Hello, 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 everybody. Well, I forgot to turn the lights on my other mic. Okay. So today, I wasn't here yesterday. I'm sorry. I wasn't feeling it, and I didn't feel like I could put out a very good video if I wasn't feeling like putting out a video. I don't know if I was trying to catch a cold or if I was trying to fight off a cold. I don't know. I just know I wasn't feeling very well. But I'm still not 100%. And I've just been outside with Butch. He got his new bike in the mail today, and he's been out there for the last 2 hours putting it together. And now he's just accessorizing a guy thing. Okay, so anyway. Today we're going to talk about why the attorney Alan Jackson removed himself from Nick Reiner's case. Now, if y'all know, Nick Reiner is Rob Reiner's son, and Rob Reiner was on All in the Family, and he was Meathead, and yeah, so y'all might be too young to know All in the Family, but so and he's done other things. But so anyway, so let's get into it. We've got 6 pieces I want to look at today. And the next door neighbor comes in with her hot rod Camaro or whatever she's got out there, Trans Am, something, I don't know what it is. I know she revs it up real loud. All right, she's got it turned off now. We can come in. So this is Lawyer Nick. There's a link to his channel in my description. If you don't watch him, please check out his channel and maybe subscribe. Okay, I give him a thumbs up. Let's go full screen on this side and listen.
So I recorded a live earlier today where I gave a lot of my thoughts, and I am going to clip them and kind of put them in and fuse them into this video. So a lot of those were recorded before I record this section, but there was more to the hearing that a lot of people were talking about while I was giving my thoughts on it. And I gave my thoughts before watching the hearing, before watching the press conference. So you're going to, understand that context when you hear what I think the most common reason for something like this happening in this type of case at this point in the case from an attorney like Alan Jackson.
Monday.com, the opposite of any work platform we tried in the past. We tried other work management platforms, not
Jackson. So you'll wait to hear that. But
Okay,
let's start out by actually listening.
I'm wondering, how can you give your comments on something before you've even watched it? Well, he's a lawyer. He knows these things.
To the hearing to see if there's anything we can gain from some of the context clues of what happened in the hearing today.
Good morning, Your Honor. Alan Jackson, on behalf of Mr. Reiner, who's present in court out of custody. I'm sorry, in custody.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor. Habib Bailey for the people.
Your Honor, we have a matter of housekeeping that I'd like to address in chambers in dealing with the 10 subpoenas that are outstanding. There are 10 current subpoenas that are outstanding. We would ask that body attachments be issued and held for each of the 10, specifically with subpoena number 4 on the list and subpoena number 10 on the list.
So why did I play this? Why is this important to play? You're going to hear in the conversation I have and some of the questions from the chatters about a conflict of interest. Everybody is so sure there's a conflict of interest here. And I give my thoughts on that. But another thought on a conflict of interest is when you are a lawyer and you have a conflict of interest on a case, you cannot make arguments like this. You cannot argue about subpoenas. You cannot say, Judge, we want to do this with this subpoena. Hold off on that subpoena. They're allowing jurisdiction over here, Judge. I've talked with the lawyers on these subpoenas. No. It's a total Zach Morris timeout. You shouldn't be working on this case anymore if you are truly conflicted off. And we're going to just listen to Alan Jackson do his thing and work and represent and fight for Nick Reiner throughout this hearing before he eventually withdraws. And even these details, these minute details that are not a big deal, not going to make or break Nick Reiner's case probably, but Alan Jackson is still working on them. And I would be surprised if a judge would allow it or if Alan Jackson would even try to do something like this on a case that he is knowingly in his mind conflicted off of, and there's nothing he can do to overcome that conflict. Nick Reiner can't waive that conflict to keep Alan Jackson on the case, which is what would it have to be in order for some of the verbiage Alan Jackson uses, like it's outside of Nick Reiner and my control that I can no longer continue on in this case.
Counsel for both of those individuals and those parties have appeared in court. They're here with us today. We have no principled objection to an extension of time for them to comply with the subpoena, but to maintain jurisdiction, we would ask that body attachments. We
have no objection to a continuance of time to allow them to respond to the subpoena. That's making a decision, a legal decision, argument, helping Nick Reiner on what would be best for his case as a lawyer that I don't think you can be doing if you're conflicted off the case.
I don't have the list. I'd like to get a copy, and I haven't seen the proof of service, but I assume the court
is counsel for foreign.
This video is clipped and like jumping around, but you're getting the main gist of the point of what our video is.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm not sure which number I am.
Number 10.
I'm counsel for number 10, and we do object to issue if that would resolve the court's concerns about retaining jurisdiction. However, we see no reason, given our appearance here to issue the body attachment.
Counsel for number 4. In counsel number 10's statement, I don't see the necessity for issuing a body attachment. I too will stipulate the jurisdiction without necessarily waiving any objections we ultimately may make. But given my newness to the matter, I don't see the necessity of having a court order issued against an individual in this circumstance.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just to be clear, we do also reserve all objections.
Yes, and so, but as to the remaining
numbers, that's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those, the court will issue body attachment and hold it until the next court date.
And
And
we have no objection to counsel's representations given the fact that
We have no objection. We, meaning me, on behalf of Nick Reiner, have no objection. He is making this statement. Seemingly, I don't know if something happened because of how the video is cut up, but seemingly he is making this statement right before he withdraws from the case. And it seems like based on conversations had in chambers, everybody knew the withdrawal was coming and that it was going from him to the public defender's office, which to me reinforces, if I'm reading between the lines, what I think is going on in the background, which I'll share with you right after we're done with this hearing.
This is how you can uncover all the secrets of your family that no one ever told you.
There is a platform where you can search.
both have graciously submitted for jurisdiction with regard to 4 and 10. We think that's appropriate.
thank you. Once again, the court will issue and hold 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Thank you.
Until the next hearing date. And we'll
Does the
seal,
court have a list?
it does. The court will seal that list as well.
We've asked,
People have a copy or?
we've asked that the court seal it specifically because it is ongoing defense investigative data or evidence that we recover or we get, our counsel on behalf of Mr. Reiner gets, and that is discoverable. We'll comply with all, or counsel will comply with all discovery obligations.
He keeps saying, we will do that. I mean, counsel for Nick Reiner. We will do, counsel for Nick Reiner, which again does not sound like a conflict. And maybe he'll even still help and, be there with the public defender. I don't know, but strange verbiage throughout.
That's
Can you address the council's request to provide a copy to the people?
That's the point. We think that should not be done because that would implicate ongoing investigative efforts by the defense. And it would compromise Mr. Reiner's right to a fair trial and his right to maintain his investigation with some level of confidence or confidentiality, I should say.
But at this time, the court will just seal it until the next court hearing date.
Thank you.
And how else would you like to proceed?
Your Honor, at this time,
So after he handled those issues on behalf of Nick Reiner, after he made arguments on behalf of Nick Reiner, after he did his job as an attorney, protecting till the very end, fighting for his client, which is exactly what he should do, but not something you can do if you're conflicted off. So he just did all that,
You're fine.
and now he's
We
going to
just got
withdraw.
started.
I, on behalf of Workman Jackson and Quinn, and with Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, would ask to withdraw as counsel's record based on the conversation that we've had in chambers and the explanation that we've provided to the court.
So the judge already knew this. And the judge, because of the explanation that happened in chambers, the judge already knew this was happening and still allowed him to argue for, fight for, and represent Nick Reiner up until this point at this hearing. Like when you're conflicted off, you can't even refer a client to another lawyer. You can't have anything to do with that case if there's an actual and unwaivable.
Our moderator, Amanda Panda, was late. She had to work late today. She's late. You get a late sit. You are late. You're okay. You're okay. I'm glad you're here. That's what matters. And for anybody watching on a replay, I'm glad you're here as well. Thank you. Please hit that thumbs up.
Conflict or a conflict that has not been waived.
In chambers, we feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw as counsel and ask to be relieved. The public defender's office has been notified. We've had conversations with them. They are here. They're staffed. They're ready to take over. My understanding is they are ready for the appointment immediately, forthwith.
So they're ready for it immediately, forthwith. Okay? So now that we have that context that I didn't have when I gave my initial thoughts, okay? But let's jump into what I think is going on here and how I would explain it as best as I can as somebody who's practiced criminal defense, as a private criminal defense attorney, has been hired early on cases and had issues come up to where we've had to withdraw in the past. Let's get into it. Everybody has come and said, oh, what's going on? He didn't want his name attached to this loss. Something happened in the background that he didn't know about. Now that he knows about it, now he's quitting. Honestly, I don't think any of that is what happened here. I don't think Alan Jackson is scared of taking a loss. Defense attorneys just aren't. I don't think, something horrible came up in the background and Alan Jackson is like, this is against my ethics and morality that I can't handle this case. Again, I'm just guessing, right? With what I know about Alan Jackson, what I know about the case, what I know about being a criminal defense attorney. What is more probable, I will say, based on my experience, is when you get hired very early on in a case, basically in a scenario where it almost feels like impossible that the client himself could have reached out to you and paid you and signed a contract and hired you, and you show up with some kind of expectation, like, here's my fee, this kid has a trust, and he's going to be able to pay me my fee out of this trust. And it turns out he actually doesn't have the trust, or the assets are frozen, or he doesn't have access because he's accused of taking the life of the person that would put the money into the trust after he died. And therefore, Mr. Green, aka the money, didn't come in. And by the way, some people.
Amanda Panda says, he's broke. Yeah, he messed things up if he's the one that did that to his parents.
People might hate on Alan Jackson for that. I don't. Not in the least. Lawyers get paid for their work. Good lawyers get paid a lot of money. And even if they've taken a case pro bono or done a case free in the past, does not mean they're just going to start taking all their cases for free.
She's a poor public defender. Now, I don't know if you're appointed as a public defender, I don't know if the client still has to pay you, or if someone out there in jury land or judge land or some other land over there that we ain't been to yet, the money comes out of thin air. They got to get paid somehow. No, they don't get paid for their work, especially if they're public. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know. Then why would anybody want to be a public defender? Why would anybody, if you're not going to get paid for it? Unless you got a big trust fund yourself. And she says, yes, they still get paid. And if you do make enough money to pay something, they may require you to make a payment. But they have to run so many cases that they don't get paid what they should get paid. And so they don't do the job that they should do, which I don't blame them. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. The only thing I know about lawyers and pro bono and all that stuff is from what I watched from, what was the show that I watched with the lawyer? I don't remember. She died and she came back in another, she was a model and she come back in a lawyer's body. And I don't remember the show, but I watched it like twice, the whole series. That's all I know, because I don't know a lot about this.
Free. If they want to, sure, they can. But the most probable reason Alan Jackson is no longer on Nick Reiner's case probably has to do with money. I also heard reports, I don't know if this is true yet, that
Amanda says, but the public defender has probably been working nonstop around the clock already and then got thrown into this high-profile case and has to make a decision to defend. Oh, that makes sense. If he's a good attorney, he's probably wanted in many places, and he probably can't run that many cases in conjunction together because they might conflict in time.
A public defender has been appointed, and that Nick Reiner now is a public defender. So if Alan Jackson was there and he's off, but it's not about money, I would think there would be a different private attorney hired. If Alan Jackson had a conflict of interest he didn't know about, which is possible, that's another thing that sometimes comes up. If it's a conflict of interest, he could have hired another attorney. Now, one conflict of interest, and by the way, I don't at all ever expect Alan Jackson to come out and say it was about money, okay? I don't think that he would ever say that. But if there's been a lot of reports, some of the reports have said Alan Jackson was like on retainer or the attorney for the Reiner parents. And if Alan Jackson represented the Reiner parents, that could potentially be a conflict of interest that would not allow him to represent Nick Reiner.
That's
Now,
what I was
to
thinking.
me, that's very weird that he would even take the case in the first place if that was the conflict. Like, you know that that's the conflict before you take the case when he calls you and you tell what he's charged with. Even if he says he didn't do it, the victims of the criminal case are still the Reiner parents or couple. I know Rob and his wife. So that's a very strange thing. Alan Jackson's a really smart guy, a really great lawyer. I don't think that type of conflict would just like pop up. Somebody said there's a video, gave an interview on it. If you guys have that, send it to me. Maybe I can look at it right now. I don't know how long it is. Other people saying definite conflict of interest. I hope it's a conflict that nobody could have known about, that just popped up, that didn't have to do with the parents, because we already knew the parents were going to be the victims in this case. I will listen to the press conference. Somebody said something else I thought was interesting. Let's see. He used plural reasons. Yeah, no surprise. John, if somebody emails it, forward me the email. I'll look up on YouTube real quick, but there was something else I wanted to. LawyerYouKnow@gmail.com. Pressers on Court TV. Let me just pull up my YouTube here. But at the same time, while I'm pulling up this interview, somebody else said that Alan Jackson said it was out of his control and outside Nick's control. That can still be code for money, by the way. Let me see. Alan Jackson. "45 minutes ago, 1 minute. Let's see if this is it. All right, let me see if this is it. If this is not it, you guys can let me know. I love a good audible in the middle of a video, don't you guys? All right, here we go.
Your Honor, at this time, I, on behalf of Workman Jackson and Quinn, and with Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, would ask to withdraw as counsel of record based on the conversation that we've had in chambers and the explanation we've provided to the court in chambers. We feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw as counsel and has to be reviewed. The public defender's office.
Okay, so this is not the press conference, but this is interesting because it is. We'll have to clip this out into its own video, John. But let me see here. Okay, John sent it to my email, so let me go to my email. We're going to keep listening to this because this is the actual hearing of him withdrawing, which I find very interesting. So we're going to listen to this, and then it is not in my email, John, so please forward it. Okay, let's finish listening to this.
Office has been notified. We've had conversations with them. They are here. They're staffed. They're ready to take over. My understanding is they are ready for the appointment immediately, forthwith.
So this is not something that just popped up today. You can't hear it. Okay, I'll bump the volume up as much as I can. So basically, he just said, I'm withdrawing. Public Defender's Office is here. Public Defender's Office is ready, and Public Defender's Office is going to take this over. So it's not a surprise. It's something that they had already had conversations about before today.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kimberly Green from the Public Defender's Office. That is correct.
So the court will case, and so that firm is relieved as counsel of record, and the court appoints the Public Defender's Office to represent Mr. Reiner.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Current counsel turnover, any items that they receive.
We will absolutely comply with that regarding the gun that the mediation has been met.
Your Honor.
All right. I still don't have anything in my email. All right, I'll look for another second and see if I can find it. Okay. All right. Ashley, thank you. All right. I've got it on Twitter here. All right.
He still calls it Twitter, like X. I was telling Butch when he was resetting my computer the other day over the weekend, I was like, you got to put X on there. What's X? Twitter. You got to put X on there.
Here we go.
Have dictated that, sadly, it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick.
So hold on, let me make sure I got from the beginning. But obviously he says it has made it impossible for us to represent Nick.
Control. Have dictated that, sadly, it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick. I'm legally and I'm ethically prohibited from explaining all the reasons why. I know that's a question on everybody's mind. We expect the public defender to step in. They've already been appointed and very capably protect Nick Reiner's interests as he moves forward through the system. But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests.
Very weird. I'll just tell you, very weird. People are saying you missed the previous bit. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. This is what somebody sent me. This is kind of a weird and cryptic statement where he is committed to still being involved or helping Nick Reiner, but he can't. So he is kind of mentioning a conflict, but if it's a conflict, you can't work on it. You can't be involved. So he's...
When my streaming bill hit $180 a month for channels I don't even watch, I didn't get mad.
We're back. I just heard
taking a step back. It just all feels very cryptic to me. And I'll just tell you, okay, behind chambers, behind closed doors, money issues and things that come out and make it impossible to go forward, you don't come out and say that, okay? You don't come out and say that in a press conference like this. I've almost never heard a lawyer come out and say that, whether or not it is the real issue. Okay, let's keep listening. What if he represents a witness? That could very well be the case. Could absolutely very well be the case. That's a good point. That's a good possibility.
In fact, we know, we're not just convinced, we know that the legal process will reveal the true facts of the circumstances surrounding this case, Nick's case. You know, a lot's been printed of late, over the last 3 weeks. A lot has been printed about Nick, printed about his family, printed about the circumstances. Speculation is in print. On December 15th, in the early morning hours, I was in New York at the time, and I got a call. Me and my team, we dropped everything. And for the last 3 weeks, we have devoted literally every waking hour to protecting Nick and his interests. We've investigated this matter top to bottom, back to front. What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder.
Okay, so Alan Jackson doing only as Alan Jackson can. The way he said that to me could not have been louder and clearer that there is an insanity element to this. He is not guilty under California law. Not he didn't do this. He didn't do this horrible act. He didn't, touch his parents. It wasn't him. Very different than under the laws of California. He is not guilty. Also very strange for a lawyer to say that on a case he just got conflicted off of. I've never heard a lawyer that had a legitimate conflict that couldn't work on the case anymore because of a legitimate conflict and then still commenting on the case. So I'm very interested on what happened here. If it's money, then he can absolutely, I'll just tell you right now, if it was a money issue, regardless of if we ever find that out, And I will probably never find that out. If it is money, what he's doing right now is totally appropriate, totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's like, he couldn't pay me. I wish he could, because we looked into this case. He's got a great argument. I think he's legally not guilty. I feel for the Reiner family. I feel for the tragedy. This is horrible. All these people speculating, saying stuff about him, saying, he did this, or his relationship with his dad was that, or he hated his dad, or they want to make it seem like Nick hated these people. He didn't. It was a mental health issue. So like, him kind of going with that narrative, just because a client can't pay you doesn't mean you don't have to still be in their corner, have their back, like them, speak publicly nicely about them. But if you're conflicted off a case and you have a legitimate conflict, I saw people saying something about subpoenas. It could have something to do with subpoenas. Jackson may have represented one of the witnesses they wanted a subpoena, and that's how he found out about a conflict. Sure, that could happen, I guess. But this would be weird then. This press conference would be weird if that's really what happened. And by the way, I can't make this any clearer. When I say I think it was about the money, or I'm guessing it was about the money based on my experience in education and dealing with these things, I don't mean anything negative about that. We have had to withdraw from cases because clients couldn't pay what they agreed to, or could no longer pay, or whatever it may be. It happens. It sucks. But it's like, have you ever tried to build a house? If you stop paying the contractor, they're going to stop building the house. It sucks. I feel horrible. But yeah, Ashley, I mean, this is maybe an overgeneralization, but I tend to agree that if you have the money to hire Alan Jackson, and I think Alan Jackson would agree too, you would probably hire Alan Jackson over getting appointed the public defender. It's just my guess. Yeah. Michelle, this could be to every job, right? You're going to show up day after day after day if they tell you, well, we can't pay you anymore? People think differently and look differently at lawyers, maybe because of how much money some lawyers make and whatever. I get that. But we're just here to explain how it really is. And all the signs for me are pointing towards not going to be able to fund the defense. And maybe and we've also heard in the Boehm case, right? The Frazier Boehm case. Well, Judge, can you please lower his bail amount? We've got to hire experts. This is all really expensive. But you know who still is his lawyer? Alan Jackson. Which means he still has enough money. If I was going to guess, if I was reading the tea leaves. No, hockey, please don't spread this. I am not saying anything is confirmed about money. I do not know. People are asking me, what are the possibilities? How does something like this happen? And with all the...
He's going off subject. Now we're going to go to Ashley Banfield. She's going to explain it in a totally different way. She also, I do believe, was an attorney. I don't know. I know she works for News Nation, and she knows a lot.
Nobody blinked. Nobody blinked when an A-list lawyer signed on to the most shocking celebrity murder case of the decade. But when that same lawyer bolts before the client is even arraigned, that is news, my friends. And that is the jaw-dropping twist that we all witnessed in Los Angeles today. Rob Reiner's son, Nick Reiner, was in court this morning answering to 2 counts of first-degree murder. Because last month, Rob and his wife, Michelle, that would be mom and dad, were found butchered in their own bedroom. Their son, Nick, was arrested quickly. And in court this morning, Nick Reiner watched alongside everybody else while his high-powered attorney, Alan Jackson, told the court that he is out.
On behalf of Orton Jackson and Quinn, and with Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, would ask to withdraw as counsel's record based on the conversation that we've had in chambers and the explanation we've provided to the court in chambers. We feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw as counsel and has to be relieved.
I blew up his phone today, by the way, asking Alan, what? Explain? Didn't get a response. I'm not surprised. There's a mystery. We'll find out. But the judge agreed to all this. And instead of Alan Jackson, Nick Reiner now has a public defender. And her name is Kimberly Green. Judge also delayed the arraignment more than a month to February 23rd, and officially, that was that. Outside court, though, different story. Reiner's now ex-attorney, Alan Jackson, had lots more to say.
This morning, I had to withdraw as Nick Reiner's counsel. Circumstances beyond our control, but more importantly, circumstances beyond Nick's control, have dictated that, sadly, it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests. In fact, we know, we're not just convinced, we know that the legal process will reveal the true facts of the circumstances surrounding this case.
The legal process, there's a lot of language there, and it's nuanced. And unless you're one of those arcane people who follows court all the time, yeah, maybe the legal process will find him not guilty. But I doubt of killing his parents. There is the insanity defense, which is by reason of insanity, you're not guilty. It doesn't mean you walk free. It can mean you spend the rest of your life in prison, and we got plenty of examples of that. Spokesperson for the family says, and I quote, "They have the utmost trust in the legal process and will not comment further on matters related to the legal proceedings." But there's so much more about this case that has yet to be revealed. And my old friend Harvey Levin and his team at TMZ are usually the first people to unearth the facts, and they did this time. So we chatted just a short time ago. Harvey, what is your reaction to this bombshell that Alan Jackson is stepping away from Nick Reiner's case?
So we broke that story today, and we had been hearing this. So, look, I think there are things I can say and things that I just can't. But I will say this, that the Reiner family, when you look at their statement saying what we want is, we want justice, essentially. But they never define what justice is. And I think that in itself is telling. That you've got to imagine that this family has so many conflicting emotions. On the one hand, Nick Reiner is their flesh and blood. On the other, the flesh and blood of their parents was basically butchered in that home, courtesy of Nick Reiner. That's pretty clear. And so for that family to process the loss of their parents, the way they were killed, who killed them, and then...
So it sounds like some people are still adamant that they believe Nick did this, and some people aren't. Some people believe he didn't do it. I don't know. I wasn't there. I just heard it came up on my YouTube feed. Rob Reiner passed away. You know, so, and I didn't know who Rob Reiner was. I had to look up online, find out, and I said, "Oh, that's Meathead." Okay, because I watched All in the Family. My dad watched All in the Family, and I happened to be in the room. But yeah, I know who Nick, but he went on to do a lot of things. So, yeah, it sounds like the country's like about 60-40 on whether they believe he did it or didn't do it.
And to have some understanding of what was going on in Nick Reiner's world, and there is a big story there, Ashley. It is a slew of emotions. And so when you look for one answer to this, I don't think you're going to find it.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you.
Yeah, you know, I am so interested in what you just said regarding the justice. Our family wants justice. It could mean justice for Nick. It could mean justice for Rob and Michelle. And I'm so curious about the money. You and me, we both follow the money because that's what we've been taught as journalists to do. Do you think that the Reiner family cut him off and said, you're not accessing the Reiner money for a big, expensive lawyer?
I don't think that's what happened here, based on what I know. Makes sense. I know why you're saying it. Crossed my mind too. I don't think that's what happened here.
Have you had a chance to talk to Alan Jackson at all and find out what's behind this move?
You know, I think what's behind the move is a very complex issue with this family, that they have lost their parents in a brutal way at the hands of their flesh and blood. So, you know, again, when you think about them saying what we want is justice, they never define justice. And frankly, Ashley, from what I'm hearing, that's not an easy thing for them to define. They want justice for their parents, but there's also something big that is going on with Nick in terms of mental health. It is why Alan Jackson got in front of the cameras after he withdrew today, or on Wednesday, and said that Nick Reiner will be found not guilty of murder. He is saying that not because he's arguing that the Reiners did not die at the hands of Nick. He's saying it because where this case has been going, Ashley, is not guilty by reason of insanity. And that's where this case...
That's what the lawyer you know is saying, by California law.
Is heading, and it has to do with mental health, and it has to do with allegations that the mental health system has shockingly failed Rob, Michelle, and Nick Reiner.
Well, I know that your special that's coming out on Friday, TMZ investigates the Reiner murders, what really happened. You've uncovered some critical evidence, I think, to the very point you're making right now, and that is not guilty to some people doesn't incorporate the not guilty by reason of insanity. Doesn't mean you didn't commit the crime. It just means you're not mentally capable of being guilty by reason of law. So can you share anything or at least tell us a little bit about what you've uncovered in the special?
I can be specific. So a month before the murders, Nick was on antipsychotic meds. Nick had been diagnosed around 2020 with a form of schizophrenia. We know this. It is called schizoaffective disorder. It is a severe form of schizophrenia that not only involves psychosis, delusions, but also involves severe mood disorders. And when you combine the two, it becomes volcanic. So Nick had been on antipsychotic meds for several years. And a month before the murders, what we are being told is those meds were working. They were working fine. There is for some reason, his doctors changed the meds and it sent him into orbit. He became delusional. He became dangerous. The Reiners saw it. They were alarmed. It built and built and built the month before the murders. And it all revolved around.
So we need to blame Nick's doctors. They changed his medicine. They made him go berserko. So he did it because of what his doctors did to him.
Found a change in the meds. Now, what I am told, Ashley, I'm going to tell you what I know and what I don't know. What I'm told is that there was absolutely no justification to change the meds. And the reason it was changed, I am told, would shock you, would absolutely shock you, that you can't even look at logic to understand it. As to what it is specifically, my sources will not say, but they know something about the change in these meds. And I have confirmed this with others too, that the meds did change, and he just went off the rails. And so
Well,
there is something about that change that directly connects to Nick's state the night of those murders.
Which may be the reason Alan Jackson went out with a bang and said, I can tell you definitively, he had very strident language, that Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder, which again, remind everybody, it doesn't mean not guilty of committing them, just by reason of insanity, which leads me to my next question. Without Alan Jackson there, he's got a public defender, but do you expect this public defender to stay in place long, or do you think some other high-octane attorney is going to step up?
Well, look, if this defense is used, I don't see how the public defender can do this, because as you know, that in cases like this, you need expert witnesses. This is complicated. He was in rehab 18 times. There are all sorts of problems that you and I have not even discussed involving those 18 stints in rehab, about what the rehab facilities did and didn't do. And there's a big story there. So they're going to need a lot of expert witnesses. We are talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just for the experts, not to mention what a lawyer might cost. And I don't know that the public defender has the resources to do that. So I honestly don't see this being handled long-term by the public defender. Will another lawyer step in? If I had to guess, the answer would be yes. And, you know, we just have to see how this plays. I think money is an issue here. And it's not that the Reiners don't have the money. Rob Reiner was worth a fortune. But, you know, right now there is an estate, there are family members, there are feelings. So I think you got to see how this all plays out. And I think money, you know, could become a factor here. But it's money mixed with feelings, and that gets really complicated.
Harvey, I have so many other questions for you, and I have most of the questions about competency and insanity. They're two totally different things, and I can see both of them brewing. Can you stand by for just a bit till the B block?
Yep.
Okay, more Harvey after the break. So the murder case against Nick Reiner is barely out of the gate, and already he's on his second attorney, and his potential hypothetical defenses, mainly centered on drug addiction and mental illness, are being dissected online daily. As you're no doubt aware, Nick Reiner is accused of fatally stabbing his own parents to death, legendary actor and filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle. But Nick's outgoing lawyer, the prominent and successful Alan Jackson, declared today, and I quote, "Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder." But surprisingly, that statement can actually mean a lot of things. TMZ's Harvey Levin and I spoke extensively today about the path forward for Nick Reiner and what his chances of prevailing actually are. Here's more of our conversation. There is one thing when it comes to insanity. There is another thing when it comes to competency. And competency is the gateway to walk into a courtroom in the first place. Is there any chance that Nick Reiner is going to be ruled incompetent and can't even stand trial?
There is a big chance. And it has to do with what we talked about a few minutes ago, which is that Nick is still not stabilized from these drugs. He's now being treated by jail doctors, and these drugs are not working. In order to be competent to stand trial, you have to be able to assist in your own defense. I have real questions about whether Nick Reiner at this point is capable of doing that.
Well, you also have to understand the charges against you. And if he's in that kind of psychosis, he may not even know that his parents are dead. I mean, this is a high bar, even though people don't think it is. It kept Elizabeth Smart's captors out of court for the better part of a decade.
We have got to the point where literally anybody can build a fully working app without knowing how to code. This is base.
Well, I can only talk about certain things right now, Ashley, that we're going to have in the documentary. But I will say this about what you just said. Even if somebody knows what they did, I'll give you an example. There's a man named David Carmichael who was in Canada, and he strangled his 11-year-old son. He was on an antidepressant. He became psychotic, and He not only, he strangled him in a hotel room, put him on the bed, watched television for 6 hours, and called the police and said, I just killed my 11-year-old son. So David Carmichael knew exactly what he had done. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and the judge accepted it. So you can know what you did, but a lot of people in a psychosis do it because of a delusion that they're doing it to save the person. They're doing it because in their mind, that person has become an ominous threat, something like that. So even if they know what they've done, that doesn't mean they're still competent to stand trial. It has to do with understanding that, what the case against them is, whether they can assist in that case, help the lawyer, and that's an issue. But you don't think it's just about not understanding what you've actually done.
No, what I'm always fascinated by is the circumstances that bring certain people into courtrooms where they do rule them incompetent. Oftentimes they don't.
Wow, I didn't know all that. You learn something new every day, don't you?
Even know what's going on around them. I mean, it can be so bad, and we don't know the situation with Nick, but we know it's bad. Let's move to the possibility that he jumps over the bar for competency. And it is ruled that he is competent to stand trial. Well, now there's a whole other kettle of fish to attack, and that is, does he know right from wrong, right? That's a big one. And is he able to assist in his defense? And one of the issues with Nick Reiner's pattern after the murders is that he took off. He got a hotel room. He washed himself off. Those are really, really difficult facts to get past if you're trying to establish that he didn't know right from wrong.
Okay. I'm not trying to be contentious today because you and I have known each other for years, but I will argue with you on that because knowing right from wrong is not an essential element of the insanity defense. The insanity defense means that you don't understand the nature and quality of the act. David Carmichael, who I just mentioned, knew that he killed his son. He also called the police and said that he believed he would end up in prison for the rest of his life because he felt what he did was morally right, even though he felt it was legally wrong. So David Carmichael knew exactly what he had done. He knew it was against the law. He did it because of his delusion, yet they found him not guilty by reason of insanity. Similarly with Nick, you're right. Nick fled. Nick went to a hotel in Santa Monica. Nick, watch the documentary, but there are other things he did.
Something's coming, yeah. Something's coming. I can tell you're going to drop something really, okay. You got to come back on this show in the next couple of days, because I can sense you're holding back a little bit.
You almost got it out of me.
I will say this, Harvey. Some states have two prongs, right? Some states have the McNaughton rule, which means you got to have two prongs, which is I don't know the difference between right and wrong, and I don't understand the charges against me. There are two different, but California may be different. In any case, I can see that you've got something more. So will you come back on the show?
Of course I will.
I always love talking to you because you're a lawyer. Harvey Levin, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashley.
Okay, so that's what Ashley Banfield. Now let's see if we can see the actual trial from Court TV. Oh, and by the way, that loud bang I heard was it started raining and the wind blew my front door open. It slammed against the wall. Sorry. Oh, I put it up there, but I forgot to put it on screen. StreamYard started this new thing where you can pull it up, but you have to add it to the stage. I'm sorry I messed that up.
Put it there.
He went on to become a prolific director of such films as This Is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, and When Harry Met Sally.
I came here tonight because when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible.
Reiner and his wife, Hollywood producer Michelle Singer Reiner, were found in their home fatally stabbed. The Reiner family confirmed the deaths in a statement posted on Variety.com. It is with profound sorrow that we announce the tragic passing of Michelle and Rob Reiner. We are heartbroken by this sudden loss, and we ask for privacy during this unbelievably difficult time. The Reiners married in 1989 and had 3 children together, sons Jake, Nick, and daughter Romy. Nick Reiner has spoken openly through the years about his issues with drug addiction and homelessness. In 2016, he appeared in this clip, currently circulating on social media, with his father. It was a panel discussion promoting the movie Being Charlie, which was partially inspired by Rob Reiner's experiences parenting Nick.
The whole process for me, I can just speak for myself, it did make me understand him a lot more, and I think it made me a better father. Hopefully it did. If your kid is going through rough times, you know, the parent your main job is to keep your child safe.
As police, media, and onlookers converged on the home, sightings were reported of Reiner's friends and collaborators, Larry David and Billy Crystal. Tributes poured in from Hollywood and beyond. Carrie Elwes, who starred in Reiner's cult classic The Princess Bride, posted no words. Jerry O'Connell was one of the child actors featured in Stand By Me, and he tweeted, "Love you, Rob, sincerely." Former President Barack Obama wrote in part, "Beneath all of the stories he produced was a deep belief in the goodness of people and a lifelong commitment to putting that belief in action." All right, so Nick Reiner was scheduled to be arraigned today, but there were some surprising developments. Let's get you into court now for that hearing.
People versus Nick Reiner, case number 25 CJC F08098.
Good morning, Your Honor. Alan Jackson, on behalf of Mr. Reiner, who's present in court out of custody. I'm sorry, in custody currently.
Thank you.
Your Honor, we have a matter of housekeeping that I'd like to address in chambers and dealing with the 10 subpoenas that are outstanding. There are 10 current subpoenas that are outstanding. We would ask that body attachments be issued and held for each of the 10, specifically with subpoena number 4 on the list and subpoena number 10 on the list. Counsel for both of those individuals or those parties have appeared in court. They're here with us today. We have no principled objection to an extension of time for them to comply with the subpoena, but to maintain jurisdiction, we would ask that body attachments be issued.
I don't have the list. I'd like to get a copy, and I haven't seen the proof of service, but I assume the court.
So when they say body attachments for somebody that's been subpoenaed, does that mean they want to put an ankle monitor on them to know that they're not going to flee before they have to testify? I mean, that's what's going through my mind. I don't know. I could be wrong. 100% wrong.
Counsel for 4 and 10 present.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm not sure which number I am.
Number 10.
I'm counsel for number 10, and we do object to issue if that would resolve the court's concerns about retaining jurisdiction. However, we see no reason, given our appearance, that we are here to issue a rule of body attachment.
And counsel for number 4.
In counsel number 10's statement, I don't see the necessity for issuing a body attachment. Item 2 will stipulate the jurisdiction without necessarily waiving any objections we ultimately may make. But given my newness to the matter, I don't see the necessity of having a court order issued against an individual in this circumstance.
Fair enough as to.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just to be clear, we do also reserve all our objections.
Yes, and so, but as to the remaining numbers, that's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8, those, the court will issue body attachment and hold it until the next court date.
And
9.
Thank you. We have no objection to counsel's representations, given the fact that both have graciously submitted to jurisdiction with regard to 4 and 10. We think that's appropriate.
Thank you. Once again, the court will issue and hold the read 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Thank you.
Until the next hearing date. And
Does the court have a list?
It does. The court will seal that list as well.
We ask
People have a copy or
we ask that the court seal it specifically because it is ongoing defense investigative data or evidence that we recover or we get, or counsel on behalf of Mr. Reiner gets. And that is discoverable. We'll comply with all, or counsel will comply with all discovery obligations at that time.
Okay, address the counsel's request to provide a copy to the people.
That's the point. We think that should not be done because that would implicate ongoing investigative efforts by the defense. And it would compromise Mr. Reiner's right to a fair trial and his right to maintain his investigation with some level of confidence or confidentiality, I should say.
So at this time, the court would just seal it until the next court hearing date.
Thank you.
And how else would you like to proceed?
Your Honor, at this time, I, on behalf of Worthing Jackson and Quinn, and with Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, would ask to withdraw his counsel's record based on the conversation that we've had in chambers and the explanation we've provided to the court in chambers. We feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw his counsel and ask to be relieved. The Public Defender's Office has been notified. We've had conversations with them. They are here, they're staffed, they're ready to take over. My understanding is they're ready for the appointment immediately, forthwith.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kimberly Green from the Public Defender's Office. That is correct.
So the court will case, and so that firm is relieved as counsel of record, and the court appoints the Public Defender's Office to represent Mr. Reiner.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Current counsel turnover, any items that they received.
We will absolutely comply with that. We've already begun with the engagement has been met.
Your Honor, there's a protective order issued by the court in place regarding the handling of discovery reporter that's remaining in place for now, and we'll serve a copy of that on the Public Defender's Office along with the discovery we provide.
Yes, the court orders that order.
To me from Mr. Bailey raises a very sage point. I'm under a protective order not to provide our discovery to anybody else. That would text providing the information only to Ms. Green in her office. Then I can be in full compliance with protective order.
Anything to the people, any response to that request?
No problem. I believe the protective order spells out that it covers Mr. Jackson's firm as well as any successor counsel.
Thank you.
So we can provide everything to Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back on the record in People versus Nick Reiner, case number 25 CJC F08098.
Good morning. Kimberly Green here from the Public Defender's Office on behalf of Mr. Reiner, who again is present.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. Lee Bailey, representing the people of the state of California.
Thank you.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd ask to put over the arraignment one last time to February 23rd, if that date is appropriate.
That date is fine. Court.
Thank you, and I will work with Ms. Green to get her discovery prior to that date.
I'll take a waiver for her. Entitled, you have constitutional statutory right to a speedy arraignment. Your counsel, Ms. Green from the Public Defender's Office, is requesting that your arraignment be continued to February the 23rd, 2026. In this department, do you waive your right to be arraigned today so that your matter may be continued to February 23rd, 2026 for arraignment? Does counsel join that waiver?
I do.
The court finds that the defendant has made a knowing and intelligent waiver of his right to a speedy arraignment, and that his counsel of record joins in that waiver. Matter set for arraignment in this department, February 23rd, 2026. Bail remains at no bail. Thank you, privilege?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, stunning developments there. Alan Jackson, high-profile attorney, represented Karen Reed, also representing someone in that same courthouse involving a car crash that killed 4 sorority sisters, representing a young man in that case as well, has withdrawn from the case with Nick Reiner. Let's bring in our guest, still with us, former Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé. Philip, you're very familiar with that courthouse. It's interesting. I want to get your thoughts on this, but I want to point something out that I got from something that Alan Jackson said in court. He said, based on conversations with Nick Reiner, as well as in chambers with the judge, he says he has no choice but to withdraw from the case. What does that tell you?
Tells me one of three things. Number one, that there is a witness on the case that perhaps Mr. Jackson's firm currently or formerly represented. That is an actual conflict. That's just a guess, though. The second reason could be that right after Nick was arrested, I believe it was the family who retained Alan Jackson's firm. And under California's ethical rules of professional conduct, you need the permission of the client for the representation. Merely because the family is bankrolling and financing the defense doesn't mean that the family calls the shots. If counsel is going to rely on the family to navigate the defense, that creates a conflict. The client here is Nick. He gets to call the shots, and he is the one who has to agree in writing to the representation, not the family. If Nick won't agree, then there is no attorney-client relationship. The third reason that I suspect is the problem is California Probate Code Section 250 has a slayer statute. And what it says is that if you kill the testator as a beneficiary, you are cut out of the estate. You're cut out of the will. You're cut out of the trust. It doesn't mean that there's this extra sort of pot of gold for your defense in the murdering of the testator.
Amanda Panda says he's not going to waste any more money than he needs to. He knows he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison and he needs money on his books. That makes a lot of sense. Excuse me, that does make a lot of sense. But then again, if he didn't want his family to hold it over his head, look, we paid for this and you did this to us and we even stood behind you after all this. You know, it could be a family dispute. His family may have said, yeah, in your opinion, his family may have said, yeah, we're not going to pay anymore. So if you want to keep him on, he's coming out of your own pocket. And if he's been homeless and had addiction problems, he might not have a lot in his own pocket.
No, you're done. And if the family was using trust assets to finance the defense, it puts them at liability and at risk to having to reimburse the estate for all the legal fees. I don't know what Mr. Jackson's firm charges, but I can safely assume it's more than bus fare. It is a bloody fortune to be represented by him. So I think it created a financial conflict, not to mention that it puts the family at risk of having to reimburse the estate.
It's interesting because I didn't get the sense, based on his language. He said he spoke to Nick, he was in agreement, spoke to the judge, and then, it was clear that he had no choice but to withdraw. If the issue was money, there's always a choice there. There's other ways to get money. I mean, that's court decided. We've seen him in other cases work. I think the second Karen Reed case, he worked for free under those circumstances. I don't think the words no choice would have been used by him. And I don't think it's so clear cut under those circumstances. Might you agree with that?
It sounds like Nick doesn't have any personal assets outside the inheritance or outside the family trust that was supposed to be dispersed to him. If, in fact, he is indigent outside that trust, that's exactly why the public defender's office stands ready to represent anybody charged with a crime. So it sounds like he was indigent. He had no independent wealth, and Jackson's firm is not going to work pro bono. So that's what it sounds like to me.
All right. Now, after this was done, everybody wondered what the family of Nick Reiner might be thinking. Well, they did release a statement. And here's that statement. They said basically it was short and sweet. They have the utmost trust in the legal process and will not comment further on the matters related to the legal proceedings. And I believe they also mentioned this had nothing to do with issues with Alan Jackson or his representation. He was totally professional throughout this entire thing. So the stepping in now is going to be the public defender's office, something you're very familiar with. I believe an attorney by the name of Kim Green, 19-year veteran, is stepping in. I want to get your thoughts on this change. One thing Alan Jackson said was, we're going to dig deep, we're going to get behind the facts, et cetera, et cetera. Does that change? What changes now that the public defender's office is involved?
First of all, I am so happy for Nick Reiner because he has inherited a fantastic attorney. Kimberly Green is a very seasoned capital attorney. In fact, many years ago, when she was what we call a baby public defender, I supervised her. And she had such great promise. She is a very skilled advocate. So I have no doubt that this is going to be a piece of cake in terms of litigation, handling it, and so on. The advantage that Nick has is that there really are bottomless resources to defend him. Any expert that she might need, everything will be paid for at taxpayer expense. If she needs somebody in court, she can utilize the subpoena power of the LA County sheriffs at no cost. They will go out, serve the subpoenas. They will issue body attachments and bring anybody to court that she needs in his defense. So I'm actually happy for him.
Okay.
You're perfect.
I think I'm going to skip over this because we've just watched it twice already. This one is actually just the hearing. And I'm going to skip over that because we don't need to watch that a third time or fourth time, however. All right, here's the actual, the actual press conference. We've already watched most of it, I believe.
The bombshell development that happened in the courtroom that could change the trajectory of Nick's defense. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. A stunning twist in the Nick Reiner murder case unfolded in court today in Los Angeles, and it happened fast. The 32-year-old is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the brutal killings of his parents. Acclaimed director, just a legend in Hollywood, Rob Reiner, and his mom, photographer, producer, Michelle Singer Reiner. Both of them found dead inside their Brentwood home in Los Angeles on December 14th. Now, prosecutors say the couple suffered multiple stab wounds, and the charges come with special circumstances for multiple murders, meaning if he's convicted, Nick Reiner could face life without parole or even the death penalty. Both of those outcomes are on the table. But today's hearing wasn't about gruesome details or a plea, because before Reiner even entered a plea, his defense team cracked. High-profile attorney Alan Jackson, the guy standing beside him in those first appearances, went into the judge's chambers and then came back out and announced that he was withdrawing from the case. And just like that, Reiner was handed off to a public defender and the arraignment was delayed. This is after Reiner waived his right to be arraigned today. And then came this stunning moment. Outside court, Jackson stepped to the microphones and delivered a statement that was equal parts dramatic and deliberate, a line that immediately raises questions about where this defense is headed.
And you can take this to the bank. Is it pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
So here's the short version of how we landed in that courtroom today. Reiner was arrested in the hours after he allegedly stabbed both of his parents, director Rob Reiner and producer-photographer Michelle Singer Reiner, his own mom. He allegedly stabbed them multiple times inside the home they had lived in for decades in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles in December. Now, the next day, the district attorney of Los Angeles dropped the hammer. 2 counts of first-degree murder plus a special circumstance allegation for multiple murders, a charge that puts life without parole or even the death penalty on the table.
What I'd like to know is, how did they know to go after Nick? What was in that house that led them to believe that it was Nick that did it? It could have been anybody. It really could have. But why are they saying it was Nick? I haven't heard anybody say that.
Now, at this point, we don't know of a motive. There's been no motive that has been publicly stated at this point, no explanation.
Amanda said because of his actions leading up to that, because his medications wasn't working and he was off the rails. Yeah, that makes sense. I believe that he was acting a certain way in a bar or something. He may have said something to somebody. That makes sense. That makes sense.
For what prosecutors believe happened inside that house. We don't know the why. Nick also has been held without bail ever since. And in the days that followed, one thing really stood out immediately. It's his choice of lawyer, or at this point was his choice of lawyer, because Alan Jackson, a high-profile defense attorney, one of the biggest names in legal defense, appeared in court on Nick's behalf, really signaled that this case was going to be fought hard. But Nick never entered a plea. His arraignment was delayed once already, with Jackson telling the court that his client hadn't been medically cleared. Well, before we get to the big update that happened in court today, I think it's important to talk about the concerns that people reportedly had for Nick Reiner when it came to his years of addiction issues, as well as concerns about his mental health. So in the week after Nick's arrest, there have been plenty of stories about his bizarre behavior the night before Rob and Michelle Reiner were found stabbed to death inside their home in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles, a mansion where they had lived for decades. The Hollywood Reporter put out a very detailed story about the holiday party at Conan O'Brien's house, the comedian, the late night talk show host, a party that had a ton of A-list celebrities there. So the Hollywood Reporter talked about Nick going up to people at Conan's holiday party, allegedly demanding to know who they were and if they were famous. Apparently in this confrontation with Bill Hader that made the article, Nick was staring at him, and Bill Hader was politely trying to get out of this very awkward and concerning conversation that he was pulled into. It frankly sounds like it was more of a confrontation. Bill Hader tells Nick that he's just talking with somebody else, and then Nick just stares at him for a long period of time, according to this article in the Hollywood Reporter. Now, Nick has battled his demons. There's no doubt about that. And when it comes to issues of addiction, he's been open about the battles that he has fought since he was very young, at least as far back as when he was a teenager, because he went on podcasts and he talked about how he has been to rehab dozens of times, that he was even homeless in multiple states throughout his teenage years and perhaps into his early 20s. He ended up writing a movie called Being Charlie. It came out in 2016, 2015, 2016, and it was loosely based on his life. It was about a guy who struggled with heroin addiction and with being homeless. And the film was directed by one of the most high-profile directors of all time, the director behind When Harry Met Sally, the director behind A Few Good Men, his dad, Rob Reiner. Now, when you look at this movie, and it doesn't have the best reviews on IMDb, if I'm being honest, it could be seen that this film that Rob directed.
Police focused on Nick due to his recent disruptive behavior at a party with his father, his subsequent disappearance, and his proximity to the crime scene after the raid rooms. Well, you dug into this more than I have. Thank you for that.
After directing some of the biggest movies of all time, this was really more of an effort potentially to connect with his son, who had struggled so much. Maybe more than a way for him to make another Hollywood classic.
The best classic hidden object game.
If your kid is going through rough times, the parent your main job is to keep your child safe.
Now, that is Rob and Nick appearing together doing press for Being Charlie roughly a decade ago. This is a clip from AOL's Build series. It has since
the red rooms of Rob and Michelle Reiner leading to his arrest hours after in Exposition Park near light rail stations. As authorities tracked his movements from the party, evidence suggests he knew of the crime. Oh, okay. The way he's looking, sitting right here. Hi, H. Davis. Welcome in. We're talking about Nick Reiner and his case. And police were investigating his actions from leaving the party until the arrest ultimately charged him with their poke deaths. What I was saying, if you're watching this on a replay, you can see right here two of the best moderators anybody could ask for. These are great people. The way he's looking around and looking at the ceilings, it looks like he's about to be, he's starting to feel a little paranoia coming into that. It just what it looks like to me. I could be totally wrong.
gone viral on YouTube. It's still publicly available on YouTube. And Nick and Rob, during their press appearances, would talk about doing this movie together and what it meant to their relationship. It seems like it was something really important to them that they were able to work on this together. Now, after this film came out, it didn't appear that Nick had much of a career in acting or writing or directing. But there is also reporting out there, not only about Nick's struggles with addiction, but recently Nick reportedly was diagnosed with a very serious mental health condition. TMZ reported after Rob and Michelle Reiner were found dead that Nick had been diagnosed with schizophrenia in the weeks before his parents were murdered. TMZ said that it spoke with someone who had direct knowledge of how Nick was doing in jail.
I feel like I'm losing my voice a little bit. Amanda says, and police were investigating his actions from leaving the party until he... Did you put that already there? Yeah, you posted that twice. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't feeling well at all yesterday. And then it's rainy today.
After he was arrested for allegedly killing his parents. The story said that Nick was in a fog because of his medical condition and the meds that he has been on. And that report said that Nick at this point was not reeling in grief. And that was based off of what this article said was Nick's mental health state at the time. Now, after the alleged murders of his parents, Nick reportedly went to a hotel in Santa Monica, which is about 4 miles from his parents' house in Brentwood. And he allegedly checked into a hotel around 4 a.m, according to media reports. And the next day, just a terrifying scene played out because the room was allegedly covered in blood. This is when the staff went in to turn the room over the next day. In another big TMZ report, though, and we'll have to watch this, police perhaps searched that room without a warrant, and that could raise questions about whether what they found in that room, whether that would be admissible in court. But I think we're a long way away from that point in this story. Now, Nick was arrested by police in LA around 9:30 in the evening, the day of when his parents' bodies were discovered. Those bodies found around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And Nick was found near the campus of the University of Southern California, more in downtown LA. He was roughly 15 miles from his parents' home. NBC Los Angeles was the first media outlet to obtain video showing Nick buying what appears to be a sports drink at a convenience store, then walking across the street where you can see police pull up and take him into custody. And Nick has been in custody ever since, and he is going to continue to be in custody even after his court appearance today, as we continue to wait for him to be arraigned, and we continue to wait for him to enter a plea to these very serious charges that he's facing, that he allegedly killed his mom and his dad. Now, whether he allegedly killed his parents because of issues of addiction, or if there's a motive that we're unaware of, or whether it was the result of a very serious mental health condition, that is something that is going to be very important to watch as this case continues to move forward through the legal system in Southern California. Now, that set the stage for today in Los Angeles. Nick Reiner was brought into court again, this time expected to be finally arraigned. But before that could happen, everything shifted. Jackson asked to speak with the judge in chambers. Then minutes later, he returned to the courtroom, and this is how it happened.
I, on behalf of Martin Jackson Quinn, and with Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, would ask to withdraw as counsel of record based on the conversation that we've had in chambers and the explanation we've provided to the court in chambers. We feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw as counsel and ask to be relieved. The Public Defender's Office has been notified. We've had conversations with them. They're here, they're staffed, they're ready to take over. My understanding is they're ready for the appointment immediately, forthwith.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kimberly Green from the Public Defender's Office. That is correct.
So the court will case, and so that firm is relieved as counsel of record, and the court appoints the Public Defender's Office to represent Mr. Reiner.
Thank you.
Current counsel turn over any items that they receive.
We will absolutely comply with that. We've already begun. The deviation has been met.
Your Honor, there is a protective order issued by the court in place regarding the handling of discovery order that's remained in place for now, and we will serve a copy of that on the Public Defender's Office along with the discovery we provide.
Yes, the court will order that order.
Me from Mr. Bailey raises a very sage point. I'm under a protective order not to provide our discovery to anybody else. That would text providing the information only to Ms. Green in her office. Then I can be in full compliance with the protective order.
Anything to people in response to that request?
No problem. I believe the protective order spells out that it covers Mr. Jackson's firm as well as any successor counsel.
Thank you.
So we can provide everything to Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Back on the record in People versus Nick Reiner, case number 25 CJC F08098.
Good morning. Kimberly Green here again, the Public Defender's Office on behalf of Mr. Reiner.
On crime, we had a member of our team actually there on the ground. And they tell us that Nick Reiner didn't appear surprised by what was happening. Before the hearing even started, he was actually seen chatting and laughing with deputies. His head was shaved. He had a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. He was frankly looking worn down, but not visibly shaken. His brother and sister were not in the gallery today. Alan Jackson, meanwhile, he was pacing, crossing his arms. He was on his phone. He clearly tense from what our person in the courtroom could see. Now, even before he asked to speak with the judge, he just seemed to be very tense in this moment. Now, once the hearing wrapped, Jackson did not leave quietly. He walked straight out of the courtroom, past the cameras, and stepped up to the microphones. And that's where this case took yet another turn. Once outside the courthouse, Alan Jackson, he didn't dodge cameras. He stepped up right to the microphones, and before anyone could even ask a question, he made one thing clear. This wasn't a strategic exit, he says. It wasn't something that he wanted.
I had to withdraw as Nick Reiner's counsel. Circumstances beyond our control, but more importantly, circumstances beyond Nick's control have dictated that, sadly, it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick. I'm legally and I'm ethically prohibited from explaining all the reasons why. I know that's a question on everybody's mind. We expect the public defender to step in. They've already been appointed and very capably protect Nick Reiner's interests as he moves forward through the system. But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests. In fact, we know, we're not just convinced, we know that the legal process will reveal the true facts of the circumstances surrounding this case, Nick's case. You know, a lot's been printed of late, over the last 3 weeks. A lot has been printed about Nick, printed about his family, printed about the circumstances. Speculation is in print. On December 15th, in the early morning hours, I was in New York at the time, and I got a call. Me and my team, we dropped everything. And for the last 3 weeks, we have devoted literally every waking hour to protecting Nick and his interests. We've investigated this matter top to bottom, back to front. What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank.
You can take this to the bank.
Is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
I want you to think about that line real quick. Quote, not guilty of murder. Jackson did not say Nick Reiner didn't kill his parents. He didn't say Nick Reiner is innocent. He said, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. And that distinction matters. Under California law, a person can commit an act, even a deadly one, and still not be legally guilty of murder if prosecutors can't prove the required mental state, intent, malice, or capacity. Now, that can open the door to defenses involving insanity, mental incapacity, or a lack of criminal intent, though it is important to say that Jackson did not specify which, if any, of those defenses might apply here. What he did say is that his team investigated this case, quote, top to bottom, and walked away believing that the law itself changes how this case should be viewed. Now, the Los Angeles County District Attorney, he stepped right up to the podium himself, and he made it clear that the DA's office...
Why I get triggered when someone gives me unsolicited advice. When I was younger, it came...
is not backing down.
In our criminal justice system, every defendant is entitled to a lawyer who will zealously represent their interests and do so effectively. So too is Nick Reiner. Whether it's Alan Jackson, someone from the public defender's office, or any lawyer. He's entitled to that lawyer, and we'll make sure he gets that lawyer. Second point, in the process of dealing with that lawyer, we will make sure, the DA's office will make sure, that that lawyer is provided with full discovery of all the facts that pertain to this particular situation, whether it's interviews, whether it's any type of video, whether it's any type of expert reports. We'll make sure that that lawyer gets the facts necessary to effectively represent their client in a court of law. And third point, we are fully confident that a jury will convict Nick Reiner beyond a reasonable doubt of the brutal murders of his parents, Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner, and do so unanimously. Thank you very much.
So that is where things now stand.
That's kind of like he conflicted his statement. We're going to make sure he has an attorney. We're going to make sure everything is done right. But we're also going to try to make sure that he's convicted of the crime.
Nick Reiner remains in custody, held without bail, and he is now represented by a public defender, not the high-profile and likely very expensive criminal defense attorney Alan Jackson, who you may remember, of course, from the Karen Reed trial, where he was able to get a not guilty. This expected to be a very high-profile defense, but he is not going to be by Nick Reiner's side. As for Nick Reiner's arraignment, where he is expected to finally enter a plea, that has been pushed back to February 23rd, 2026.
Okay, now the attorneys, Alan Jackson's going to speak one more time. I don't know if it's what we've already watched or not.
Entire Reiner family. There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case. We ask that during this process, you allow the system to move forward in the way that it was designed to move forward, not with a rush to judgment, not with jumping to conclusions, but with restraint and with dignity and with the respect that this system and this process deserves and that the family deserves.
That's Nick Reiner's lawyer asking us not to jump to conclusions. And yes, it's ironic, especially the part about showing the family dignity and restraint, but he has a point. Like it or not, this case isn't a slam dunk, and Nick Reiner really could walk free. So today, let's watch an interview with an ex-prosecutor to see why. I'm Deception Detective, an attorney trained in statement analysis. This channel exposes lies and manipulation. So if that's your thing, hit subscribe. For early access to new videos, over 60 exclusive videos, and other cool perks, consider becoming a channel member. Link in description. If you're not familiar with the latest details in the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner, don't worry, this interview will catch you up. So there's just one last thing I want to say before we start watching. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in the eyes of the law. But this isn't a courtroom. I'm not a judge, and you're not a jury. We have every right to form an opinion based on the evidence available to us. Our opinion doesn't have to be beyond a reasonable doubt, nor does it have to be based on evidence that would be admissible in court. All right, without further ado, let's watch.
Joined now by Jim Clemente. He is a former FBI profiler, also a former prosecutor and host of the podcast, Best Case, Worst Case. I really appreciate you for joining me, Jim. In terms of the Nick Reiner saga, it's just awful. I wanted to start off by just asking you, there's been so many versions of what people think happened that night. How do you think it all unfolded? How do you think it went down that night?
Well, he checked into a hotel, right? And he was living at the house, but yet he checked into a hotel. It could be part of premeditation. Wanted to set up an alibi, basically distancing himself from the crimes. And, I'm not sure. I haven't heard what happened to the weapon, whether it was recovered at the scene or whether it was recovered elsewhere. But I think that's another telling factor. There's been reports that he was at a party with his parents and that there was some sort of blowout, whether it was a huge blowout or minor blowout. If that is true, that certainly could supply a motive.
Before we get too deep, the interviewer is journalist Brian Enton. I've linked his channel below if you want to go there and watch the full thing.
The Deception Detective is really good. I have watched a lot of his analysis, and if you don't watch Deception Detective, there's a link to this episode right here in my description. I would like to ask that you please check him out and give him a thumbs up, and if you like what he does, subscribe to his channel.
I'm only going to be playing a couple clips from this interview that relate to questions we asked in my earlier videos in this series, which are also linked below. So is Nick Reiner actually schizophrenic? And could he walk free even if he isn't? The answers might not be what you want to hear, but they are realistic. Listen to this.
Could it have been premeditated and he thought about it and knew what he was doing in the moment and knew what he was doing when he was leaving to get away, but it still be insanity?
The only way under the California law that would be the case is if he had an irresistible urge. In other words, he could not resist the drive to commit those actions. Again, I think that's a very bizarre law. I don't know how you prove that. I don't know how, other than his word, you could say that that's the reason why he did what he did. But to me, the general definition of insanity is not understanding the rightfulness or wrongfulness of his actions and basically not knowing that he did something wrong. if he sat there after he committed the murders, called 911 or called his family and said, hey, guess what I did? And they came over and he's sitting there admitting what he did. Well, that sounds like somebody who doesn't really appreciate the wrongfulness of those actions. But when you run and you hide and you try to clean up and you try to avoid detection and you try to avoid capture, those things tell me he's very well aware of what he did and that it was wrong.
Nick Reiner could be found not guilty and literally walk free if it's found that he had an irresistible urge to kill his parents. In other words, the schizophrenia diagnosis, which we've been analyzing since my first video in the series, could be sufficient for getting Nick Reiner off, but it's not a necessity. Even the fact that he checked into a hotel and cleaned himself up after the murders isn't dispositive of insanity. He can always claim that he was running away from demons or little green men, not the police. And that's where statement analysis would come in to determine if he's lying or if he genuinely believes what he's saying. And we've already gone over a couple tells of that in my first video in this series, which I'll link below if you want to watch next. For now, let's continue with this interview because unbelievably, this next clip is even worse.
What if he was on meth or something like that and drugs that he chose to take caused him to go insane, quote unquote insane, or to, is that still insanity, or is that because you decided to take the drugs?
Yeah, well, let me just tell you, if he did that, if that's exactly what happened, and he just magically, after it happened, regained sanity and said, oh, I gotta run. That would be a hell of a coincidence in my mind. If he took drugs that lowered his inhibitions, if he took drugs that increased his negative thinking and his rage, it sounds like those are positive actions that he took, and he should be held responsible for that. If the drugs rendered him completely out of his mind and he didn't know what he was doing and he was just acting without any consciousness of it, it's possible they could argue that that's insanity under the law. But again, I just think it's a far stretch to say that anybody who actually runs from these kinds of actions had anything close to legal insanity, because if they did, they would not understand that it was wrong. And so I think the defense has a hell of a hill to climb to prove that defense. However, again, I don't know what the specifics are. And there may be some behavior he exhibited at the crime scene that can be actually corroborated that might indicate that he didn't know what was going on.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Nick Reiner could walk free even if he premeditated the cold-blooded murders of his own parents, and even if he created that irresistible urge in his own mind. So for people like myself who believe that all criminals should be punished, it's bitter news. But we can end on a bittersweet note. Listen to this next clip, and then I'll show you why it's bittersweet.
And I've interviewed a couple of experts who explained to me that schizophrenia is normally diagnosed with people in their 20s, usually their early 20s. And Nick Reiner is in his early 30s. So there's been some skepticism that, you would get a diagnosis like that in your 30s. Do you think Alan Jackson, he's obviously a good lawyer, is sort of planting this out there, setting things up for an insanity defense?
Look, defense attorneys will do whatever the hell they can and whatever they can get away with in many cases. You just have to go back to the OJ case to see that, where they actually did a jury visit to his home, and the defense attorneys went in and redecorated his home so that he would be more acceptable to the jurors. To me, that's a crime. It should never have been allowed. The defense attorneys shouldn't be allowed to manipulate the jury or the system, period. Prosecutors are held very stringently to the rules. Defense attorneys, not so much. And yes, everybody deserves a defense and, a competent defense. But I don't believe that includes trying to influence a future jury panel, for example, or put out disinformation. I don't believe that they should be able to do that. I think when we pass the bar, lawyers are sworn to be officers of the court. And that means you don't do anything that's illegal. You don't do anything that's immoral or unethical, despite the fact that it may be a difficult case for you. You're not allowed to break the rules. That doesn't stop some people.
Before I explain why I like this clip so much, let me just be clear. I don't think Alan Jackson is necessarily doing anything immoral or illegal by leaking information to the press. After all, two things can be true at the same time. He could be using a shady tactic of anonymously leaking pro-defense stories to the press so that they prime the potential jury pool, and all that information that's being leaked could be true. But the reason I like this clip so much is because Jim Clemente is pointing out something we said in my last video about TMZ's reporting on this case. Here's that clip.
His defense is going to be not guilty by reason of insanity.
And that's a very big deal, because when you are not guilty by reason of insanity, you are not guilty of the offense, and you don't get incarcerated, you get institutionalized until you are safe enough to be back in the world.
And it happened with John Hinckley, who shot Ronald Reagan,
who is now
he's now free man.
That's right.
Another thing that struck me is that we were told that he was using illegal drugs, which exacerbated the schizophrenia. That made me think, the prosecution is probably going to say, if those illegal drugs became a big factor in what happened here, it's akin to somebody driving drunk and then killing somebody. It's not a defense that, oh, but I was drunk. You weren't supposed to drive drunk.
These TMZ reporters sure are having a very deep conversation about mens rea and criminal capacity and a whole bunch of other legal ethical considerations. And I don't think this conversation's totally organic. In other words, just like all the other Access media we've analyzed on the channel, I think they were happy to follow some talking points provided to them by Nick Reiner's attorney in order to keep that relationship open and continue getting scoops. So once again, two things can be true at the same time. TMZ can be having this phony conversation in order to prime the potential jurors before the trial starts, and everything they're saying could technically be correct, even if it doesn't necessarily apply directly to Nick Reiner. The more important question is, what does Nick Reiner's attorney think? Because more than anyone, he probably knows the truth if he spent any time alone with Nick. I'm still waiting for the answer to that question. The clip I played in the intro was the only time Alan Jackson has spoke publicly about this case. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out when I do that. If you want to continue this series, let me know by liking, commenting, and sharing. Until next time, stay true.
Okay, so what are your thoughts? Do you think, now, I was under the understanding that since he's fought his demons, that he was probably no longer on illegal substances. But if he was on the wrong medication, he could have also gone back onto the illegal substances. So anything's possible. Anything's possible. So, well, thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you do to my wonderful moderators. I appreciate you. And if you're watching on the replay, I'll catch you tomorrow. Do something nice for someone, even if it's be the reason they smile today, and search for crime.